I want to thank all of you for coming to the meeting today. Appreciate you being here. Looks good. Good job. One of your biggest challenges, sir, is going to be keeping the attention of these high school students because it's the period before lunch. So you know where their attention is going to be. I'm now Paul, your mayor. I think most of you figured that out by now. Please, if you got a cell phone, please cancel it or turn it off or whatever you can handy. Just so you don't get that feeling like, oh gosh.
Last time I turned mine off, it was
I'd really like to listen to some of these and read about some of the meetings, and they kind of get a little wild. So I think our guest veteran is very positive today. I think our guest speaker I would like to see him leave here with a really good feeling about Paisley and the people who live here. So I would like everybody to rise to the pledge, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is a question and answer process, so I'm going to read this to you, how it's set up and how it works. Now I'd like to go over a few ground rules. Each person who wants to ask a question of the senator should have gotten a ticket as they were coming in. If you still want a ticket, please raise your hand and a staff member will get you one. So raise your hand and they'll come around and give you a ticket. And you can always get a ticket and not necessarily ask a question. Students should have gotten a blue ticket and members of the general public should have gotten a red ticket. Two numbers will be called out, the person to ask a question and the person who will ask next. When your number is called, please raise your hand or stand up so a staff person with a microphone can find you. The numbers will be the last three digits on your ticket. When the senator is finished answering the next two numbers, will be called. In the interest of time, please keep your questions concise so the senator has the opportunity to engage with as many people as possible. Now I'd like to meet your Lake County Commissioner, Mr. Brad Winter.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome everybody, especially the students who came today. That's very complimentary for you to come today. Over the years, as I've been able to work with U.S. Senator Wyden, he is instrumental in the very first authorization of the Secure Rural Schools Act, which is the dollars that came into the county for our road department. It's been able to help maintain and keep our roads in the condition that they need to be. And in Lake County, there's 720 miles of roads that are county-owned roads. About half of those are gravel. Without those dollars, we wouldn't have been able to keep them in the condition they are. It's not enough money, but at least it's helped us keep a preservation program going. With that was 2001, the first time that was authorized. It's been reauthorized several times at a less amount, but still coming in, and this year was instrumental that we was able to get it again. It's come in at about 1.6 into our road department, which is so important. Another part of that is we also full funding the bill payment in lieu of taxes. And these are the things that the senator has done. Just a couple of things that's so important. Myself and our board of commissioners have been able to implement and get things on the ground through our U.S. senator and congressman. So he's been instrumental in many years in making that happen. He was elected to the U.S. Congress, I believe, in 1996. Before that, the senator was in the state House Representatives from 81 to 96, I believe. Ranking member on the Finance Committee, and I just can't say enough about the things that he's been able to bring to Oregon and to Lake County. So please, a warm welcome for our U.S. Senator.
Brad,
thank you very much for that unquestionably inflationary introduction. And I thank you for it. And Brad has been terrific working with you all these years. You've just been a wonderful, partner. So many of these big issues involve local, state, and federal getting together. And Brad's just the gold standard for collaboration. So we really appreciate it. Mayor Ralph, thank you very much as well. As you all know, if you're the mayor of a small town in rural Oregon, you get a lot of perks. You get everybody to pay for your mansion, and I believe Ralph has a cook, and I think you got a driver too, I think. So you guys know I'm kidding. And Ralph is doing this for one reason. He is Mayor of Paisley for exactly one reason, and that is because he loves this community. So let's give him a round of applause. Now, we got a lot of students. Glad to have you all here because this is town hall meeting 898. And what we're going to do for the next hour and a half is we're going to do it the way the founding fathers wanted us to do it. I won't be reading any speeches. I won't be using any teleprompters. None of that kind of thing. This is really your time to educate me. And how many of you have never been to something like this, to a town hall meeting with the senator? All the students. Okay, let's have some fun. No subjects are off limits now. Students, if your name gets called, I hope you won't get shy on us and not ask your question. The other day, a bunch of students got their names called, and they were all sitting in the front row. I knew that they knew that I knew that they were not calling when they got their question. And finally, one of them elbowed the other and said, "We better ask our question. I heard this dude is really serious and he might come to our house if we don't ask our question." So we're not going to do anything like that. But let's have some fun and feel comfortable about asking what you want to talk about, and there are no subjects off limits. So for the next 90 minutes, you're just going to educate me, Lake County, Paisley, just going to tell me what's important to you, and I'll do my best to try to respond. Okay? On with the show. Mary, you and Brad are going to call the numbers out? Or how you
go with student first?
Yeah, we'll do, why don't we do, if it's all right, it's a community, so a student and then a community member. We'll just go one each.
5, 3, 2. Everybody awake? Blue ticket. 5, 3, 2.
Last three numbers.
It's worth a side of beef. 5, 3, 2. How about a side of ground squirrel? All right.
Let's call one other student, because it sometimes takes the students a little while to get limbered up.
529. 529. Blue ticket.
Okay, would a student just like to ask a question? Is there a student in the house who would just like to ask something?
If anybody's got questions, just raise your hand.
Just raise your hand. Student? Nope, not a student, but you don't remember, you're going to get your turn.
Maybe if we get the public going, the students will understand.
Student? Come on, guys, I'm sure you got a question.
We had some prepared ahead of time.
You have some prepared?
Well, we did. We talked as a class.
Let's take us, how about a prepared question? From the student. Why you guys are gonna be so shy?
Yeah, since when are you guys so quiet? I've been there.
Okay.
Number 8,
Let's call an adult number.
Okay. Okay. Roll house done. Number 996. 996.
Lake County has never been this quiet in the history of Lake County. One more, let's call another adult number.
983. Red tickets. 983.
Okay, back to the blue numbers. Guys, this is going to be a short meeting. Blue ticket.
Blue ticket. 531.
Are you ready to ask a question?
You want me to?
Sure. I mean, we would just like make history to have somebody ask.
So, so in a lot of small communities like this, logging used to be really important, but like Bly, Paisley, I keep going on, we all had our mills shut down. Is there something going on that can kind of revitalize small-time logging?
Yeah, it's a great point. And let's talk a little bit about some of the possibilities for small communities at kind of this point in time. First, I feel very strongly that we have options as it relates to forestry. You probably heard that we got a big biomass effort going in John Day, 10-year stewardship contract. Biomass really exciting because those are the kind of skinnier trees, and also it's a good renewable energy source. And Lakeview has really been interested in that, and Brad and the mayor have been talking about something that you're looking at for biomass in the community and around the next year or so that's underway.
Red Rock Biofuels.
Red Rock Biofuels. So in my view, there's no question that we ought to be looking particularly to tap opportunities in forestry that are tied to renewable energy, because a good clean fuel, and when I was in John Day, we worked really hard for that. I think that was a natural kind of fit for the community. Second, I think there's some good opportunities in forest health. This relates to the Forest Service and the like, because we know that the West is getting hotter and getting drier. And we're going to need a lot of people to be doing preventive kind of work, going in and thinning out those overstocked stands. And I just got a big bill passed here about a month ago to really change the way the government fights fire. Historically, what's happened is prevention got the short end of the stick. We didn't have the jobs going in there and cleaning out those forests. So what happens then, you mentioned rural Oregon, it gets hot and dry, there's a lightning strike, and all of a sudden you got an inferno. Well, the government borrowed from the prevention fund to put the fire out, and everybody said, that's pretty foolish because you're just going to have more fires. You still haven't done anything about prevention. So I got together with the Republican Senator, Mike Crapo, and we got a bill passed to prohibit fire borrowing. You're going to protect that prevention money, so we can have jobs for people going in there and cleaning out the forest. And we're also in a position to treat the big fires like the disasters they are, to get treated from the disaster fund. So that just became law. I think we got some Forest Service folks back there. So those are the good people that are going to be working. You guys are all up on the new law, right? In terms of ending fire borrowing and stuff? You guys know about that? Good. So they're going to be the ones carrying it out. But we're going to need a lot of young people in the days ahead to be part of the effort to have these new forestry policies. And I think that's going to be a good source of jobs as well. That's number one. Number two, infrastructure. Now, Brad made mention of the fact that my Secure Rural School Board, which is the money that we get because the federal government owns most of our land, one of the key areas is roads. And boy, roads are a big economic multiplier. You know, you have people buying tractors, equipment, this, that, something else for all the things associated with infrastructure. And like we were just down, Mary, we got our lunch at the homestead, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so we just ordered lunch at the homestead and they were talking about the great sandwiches and milkshakes. But when you get jobs in infrastructure, people go into the restaurants and they order food, you get gas, and the whole thing. So I put forestry up at the top, I put infrastructure second, and third, I tie everything we're looking at in rural Oregon to broadband and better communications. Because if you think about things like medicine, if somebody has a stroke in a rural area, and there's like not a neurologist or really sophisticated specialist nearby, that person's going to be on the ropes in a hurry. Well, if you have broadband, you can have some telemedicine, and the small facilities in rural Oregon can be talking to OHSU or Johns Hopkins or anywhere else on earth. And so broadband communications is a big deal. And how many of you students, here's one I'm going to ask you guys. How many of you students know what net neutrality is? Raise your hand. Good, we've got some students who know what net neutrality is. Why don't you tell everybody here in Paisley what net neutrality is?
It's like protect. Are you talking in terms of like the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like your protected right to do and see whatever you want on the internet without having to pay like so much money just to like a provider or websites to go on it. You can explore the internet at your own will without taking money out of your pocket.
Thumbs up. Perfect definition, folks. Perfect definition. The only thing I'd add, if you wanted one sentence, is net neutrality means that it's so important to jobs in rural Oregon, is after you pay your internet access fee, you get to go where you want, when you want, and how you want. And everybody, just like you said, gets treated the same. Now back there in DC, the new head of the Federal Communications Commission, he doesn't like that. What he wants is something that basically helps the well-to-do. And he'd have something like paid prioritization, which picks up on what you were saying, where people had deep pockets, they could get a lot better content at a lot faster speeds than you could if you were in Paisley and you wanted to study engineering or math or something like that. You wouldn't get the same thing as the guy with, the deep pockets. And net neutrality and broadband are really a big deal for rural Oregon because that's how you make up for the distance from all the big financial markets in New York and DC and all the big financial and news centers. So we'll talk some more about economic development in the course of the morning, but I put those three up at the top. I put infrastructure, roads, and broadband, modern communications right up at the top. I also think a sleeper for us is recreation. Recreation has become a really big economic engine in rural Oregon, and I'm the author of a bill with Congressman Rob Bishop, Republican from Utah. I think if the congressman were here, he'd probably call himself one of the most conservative people in Congress. And our bill is called the R&R bill, Recreation Not Red Tape. And what we need to do is streamline a lot of the permits and stuff for guides and outfitters and all the people going outside. So I probably put that up there as number 4, and then you should have gotten started on this, my friend. I put healthcare up there, number 5, because healthcare is getting to be a bigger employer in the rural part of the state. I mean, a lot of places are still struggling to just get doctors and PAs, but I think it's going to be a bigger employer in the days ahead. So probably those 4 or 5 things. Great question. And great answer on net neutrality. You nailed it. All right. I guess we go to an adult because we had 2 students who just nailed it.
This is an adult red ticket, 991. 991.
That's me, but I'm just listening and enjoying the conversation. I do have, related to Jack's question about forestry. I understand that there's some forestry dollars coming back to the county, that part of which is meant for schools, and is that the dollars you're talking about?
Yeah, it's called the Secure Rural Schools Law. I wrote it with Republican Senator Larry Craig, and we just got it re-upped. And it also includes PILT. So as Brad was saying, this law that I wrote over the next year and a half is going to deliver to Lake County about $2 million for roads and also for police. By the way, let's have a round of applause for our police. We got a sheriff. That money goes for roads that Brad was talking about, which relates to economic development. And I really think that as we get into this debate about economic development, we look at the big multipliers, and there's hardly a better multiplier for jobs and money coming in and being spent in the private sector, not government, in the private sector, than infrastructure. And I was kidding. I mean, we just spent a bunch of money at the homestead getting our lunches, and when you have people working and the companies are buying equipment and insurance and all the things, it's a big economic multiplier.
So that money's primarily right now for infrastructure and in Lake County, mostly roads?
It can be, part of it goes for schools, part of it goes for roads, and part of it goes for police. Those 3 areas.
3 very important areas.
Yeah, yes indeed. And that's something I'm very proud of. It's probably the law I've written that's done the most for the state of Oregon, because we know rural Oregon, which is why your question was so good, got a lot of challenges. I really shudder to think what it would be like if we hadn't gotten that $3 billion. So.
Blue ticket, 988.
What's the fellow in the back that wanted to ask this question? I thought he was going to break his arm. It's all you.
Well, in order to really bring money in to an area, you need to produce something. So, what would it take if a guy wanted to start mining some of our minerals in this area? The permit process in Oregon, I hear, is pretty near impossible to start a new mine.
I think you're probably talking about the state law rather than the federal law. What I'd like to do, Ms. Gautreau here, we can get together with you. I have been a supporter of the small mines. I've been troubled by the idea of some of these big multinationals that just come in and do the strip stuff and make a quick buck. But if you're interested, we'll be glad to work with you and walk you through the system.
Well, it would help our economy tremendously, because that's something that's produced here. All these other things that you guys are talking about are spending tax dollars. We need to bring money from other countries, from outside, to do, but if you're spending tax dollars, it's a tax deficit on somebody. If $3 million, but that all came from taxpayers, didn't it?
Yeah. Let's kind of walk through what economic development is all about, because your point is a very good one. I'm basically in the climate setting business. Let's go over here. Is this where we set the temperature for the room?
No,
Yeah.
it's over here.
Oh, no, it's heat. Okay? I'm kind of in the climate setting business. The jobs come from the private sector. That's where the jobs come from. I don't have a big machine on my desk and I whir the thing around a couple times and out come the jobs. The jobs come from the private sector. But what the private sector is looking for in order to decide to put in jobs coming from the outside and the like, they want to know, do you have roads? Do you have educated students? Do you have good communications? You know what employers are asking me about more than anything else right now? Is educated students.
I don't agree. If you can educate somebody to the nth degree, if they don't have work ethic and ambition, they ain't gonna do squat. I've seen people who are very educated and they haven't done anything.
Right.
So education, it's important in certain trades, but some of my most successful friends have not gone on with higher education, but they had ambition and they were honest. And that's how you get ahead. You can educate the heck out of somebody. If they don't have ethics and drive, they're not really a real productive citizen. You can educate the heck out of them. It doesn't do any good if they're not ambitious.
You make fair points. First of all, when I think about education, I don't just think about college, sir. I think about career technical education. I mean, we need welders and machinists and people, like you say, who can go do things right now. And with respect to your point about the work ethic, in a lot of respects, that comes from the home and parents. I can't pass a law that says, thou shalt have a good work ethic. And I can't pass a law that says, thou shalt not eat 8 hot fudge sundaes every day, because both of those things are going to cause problems. Now, I can do everything I can to try to make policies that help the private sector. In other words, I didn't list 100 different things. I said there are a handful of things where government can do something that helps the private sector grow. The private sector here and the private sector that gets on the phone to Brad and the mayor and says, hey, we're thinking about putting a plant somewhere. What do you got? You got roads? You got broadband? You got those kinds of things? Tell me what you got, because that's what the competition has. So your points are very valid. I'm not disagreeing with them. And let's have Ms. Gautreaux work with you on the question of mining rules.
Well, normally if you want private sector to go, you need to get government out of the way. They hinder you in a lot of ways.
And I'm not making a case for a bunch of big, inefficient government programs. I'm just saying in a handful of areas, I don't know who's going to build the roads, for example. That has historically been a function that we have said has government involved. Period. Let's get to work with you on the mines, okay? Thanks.
Okay, here we go.
It's actually
9, 8, or 9, 6, 7.
Is this a student, Mayor?
Maybe I need to put my glasses on. 9, 8, 7.
9, 8, 7.
How about another student? Just raise your hand, students. Come on. We've had 2 students, they've nailed both of them. Great, here's another student.
Okay, this is sort of a change of subject, but what do you think should be done to address the issue of gun violence, particularly in the case of school shootings?
Yeah, a really good question. And for me, the way I begin to look at this involves something that happened in Odell, Oregon, maybe now 2.5 months ago. I don't know if you guys know where Odell is, but it's a little itty-bitty town in Hood River. So about, I don't know, it's been now maybe 2.5 months ago, a young woman got up. What year in school are you?
A senior.
You're a senior. She was a sophomore. Okay? She got up, stood straight up, looked me right in the eye, and said, Senator, my name is Eva Jones, and I live here in rural Oregon, and we know a lot about guns. We use them. Everybody's comfortable with them. We like to hunt and fish, and we're outdoors all the time. We know a lot about guns at Eva Jones of this itty-bitty town in rural Oregon. And then she looked at me and she said, Senator, we students have had it. We are tired of trying to find cabinets to hide in when they put us in these drills. We're tired of not being able to walk by the picture windows in the school because they tell us that somebody might be outside who shouldn't have a gun. And then she said, Senator, I want you to do something about it. We don't vote. We're students. We can't vote yet. But we're watching you guys. We want you to do something about it. So I talked to her a little bit afterwards, and like you, she was smart and ambitious and the like. And I can see you and your friend are. And after I talked to her, I think she thought she'd never hear from me again. And so I went back to Washington, and I heard there was going to be a big meeting of senators talking about the whole gun violence issue. And I told them I want Eva Jones from a little town in Oregon to come and be part of this program. Because she's from rural Oregon, and she says they know guns, they're comfortable with them, they use them. And they said, okay. So I got on the phone with her a couple nights later, and I said, Eva, this is Ron Wyden calling from Washington. There was a really long pause because I think she didn't believe it was actually me or me calling her. And I said, Eva, I want you to come to Washington. I want you to tell everybody back there what you just said to me. And she did. And as a result of my conversations with her, and I tried to talk to all sides. People who feel that more needs to be done, people who are NRA members, people who say anything violates the Second Amendment, people who have different views. And let me give you a couple of the things that I think we all ought to agree on. And to me, they're not Democratic things, they're not Republican things, they're not for liberals, not for conservatives, and every one of them can be done in line with the Second Amendment. The first thing we've got to do is more to keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. And I'm talking here about people with mental challenges, people who've been found guilty of domestic violence, and for peace sakes, if you're on the terrorist watch list, in other words, our government has said you're a terrorist threat, can't we agree that that kind of person shouldn't have a gun? So to me, it starts with loophole-free, airtight background checks every single time a gun is sold. There would be a background check to keep more guns, to keep guns out of the hands of those kind of people. It looks like a friend wants to ask a question. With Brad and the mayor's permission, let's just have that other student, we'll get the students going now, I think.
About the background checks,
Yeah.
they do that. And my mom, she has to have like 2 background checks to get her pistol, and she has to have a thumbprint. And it's not like airtight, but it's pretty solid. So what else do you think we should do?
What I have learned as I've watched this is there are all of these different systems all over America. There's state systems, and everybody's kind of got their own idea. I think we need, particularly because Oregon has a background check. It's considered pretty good. But if somebody comes from somewhere else and there's not a very good background check system, it's like we didn't have a background check system because it doesn't apply to us. We need a nationwide, integrated, interconnected system. And, the reality is, nobody is going to say that this by itself is going to eliminate gun violence. I mean, there are a number of other members. I'm very opposed to these straw purchases, where somebody goes to buy a gun for somebody else, but it's really for the person who, under most instances, wouldn't even be eligible to get one. But to me, these are common sense things. And that's what I'm interested in, working through with the people of Oregon steps that are common sense. And frankly, we ought to try some new things. And then we'll go back to just questions. Both of you did a really good job on what you're asking about. There's been a restriction on doing research into gun violence. And in fact, the senator who got it passed died recently, and before he died, he said, we ought to get rid of this restriction. Of course, we ought to do research. I mean, why wouldn't we do research? Take a guess who probably knows more about who shouldn't have a gun in a rural area than anybody else. Take a guess.
Local law enforcement.
Pretty close, pretty darn close. The people who own and run the little gun shop in town. They probably know more about who shouldn't be getting a gun than anybody else. So let's figure out how to use that information. And I think that this is a chance for Oregon to come up with a really common sense kind of approach. And what glad you asked the question because I think we're better than this. I mean, I'm just thinking now, have you guys had your graduation day here?
It's this Saturday.
Huh?
It's this.
Oh, this Saturday. Got a good graduation. What are you going to do next year? You're a senior.
I'm going to college at Lewis and Clark.
Oh, great. Well, tell your friends, if anybody ever wants to be an intern, make sure you call us. We like to have students from Oregon as interns. And one of them said the other day, it looks good on my resume. So that's what she said. But think about all the graduations this year where classmates are thinking about some of their friends who aren't going to be there, who are going to miss their graduation. We can do better here, folks. We're better than this. We're not going to do it by screaming and hollering at people. I've been talking to all sides. I talked to NRA members who, by the way, almost overwhelmingly support a background check. Almost overwhelmingly support a background check. And I talked to people who are on the other side. We're not going to get this solved by screaming at each other. In fact, I was at Memorial Day in Eagle Point, Central Point, and I said one of the things that's so good about that day when we honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice is at least on Memorial Day we don't scream at each other. We listen to each other. And by the way, I guess I've been here for, 40 minutes. Hadn't been a bad point made in the house. All the students made good points. Gentlemen had valid points. This is the way we ought to do it. This is the Oregon way. Trying to work together to solve problems. So good on both of you.
Well, I know drugs are highly illegal,
Hey,
but I don't know anybody that wants illegal drugs that don't get them.
Respectfully,
So, background check.
Respectfully, I'd like to let everybody have a turn, okay?
Red ticket, 988. 988.
Can I add to that? So I feel like mental health needs to be strengthened in schools. Can we do something like physical education, like mental education, like integrated into the curriculum somehow? I think that would be beneficial because these kids' parents can do a background check, but they'll take the gun out of the cabinet. And, we can't control that as much, but if we can foster good education in the school and build up their mental education and awareness and get rid of some of the stigmas, I think that would be really beneficial. Is there some way we can do that?
The answer is yes, and your point is a very good one. The government does spend money training teachers. And I think clearly your point is very valid, that more needs to be done. At least, and I was at North Eugene High School yesterday, we talked about students, faculty. There are a couple of things that we can do. First, in terms of teacher education, more can be done so that teachers can pick up on the sort of early warning signs. So I think that's number one. Second, in my health bill, when we were debating the president's bill and everybody else, I put most of the health care dollars that we weren't allocating into school-based health programs. And yesterday at North Eugene High School, which is of course a bigger district and more funds, I went to the clinic. I've got 2 or 3 people there. You can see it online. That's one of their priorities, is to try to focus on reaching out to the families. And also, I think more can be done on the storage of weapons too. I think you mentioned the question of a gun not being stored or something like that, and then the young person got it. So 3 good ideas that you've touched on, all of which I strongly support. And again, I think would be common sense. They're not violations of the Second Amendment. They're not even close to violating the Second Amendment. So, good on you.
Thank you.
Wait, I think we got another student down here. If it's all right, I think we kind of got him going.
I just wanted to bring out maybe a different point of view because we've been talking about how we can prevent people from getting the guns, and there's always the black market, and there's infinite ways where you can get a gun and do what you want to do. And the background check, I think people who already done that is like their first time. If you're already a terrorist or somebody who's been doing bad deeds, they probably know better than to go to a store and buy a gun. So is there any way which, for example, schools, there could be an inner system that could protect, like for example guards or something else that could protect if in case of that happens?
Another good point, and I want to talk about the schools, and then I want to go back to the background check system. What this student is asking about also is very sensible. It generally is called kind of hardening the school. In other words, trying to make it tougher. And I think personally, the big gap in school security is I often hear about open doors. You know, doors that people just really haven't taken the time to secure. So I think we ought to be doing more in terms of securing doors. And I've also been in support of using funds for school security. So let's take a hypothetical case. You know, Brad is going to have more dollars as a result of my Secure Rural Schools bill. Okay? He's going to have more dollars in his coffers. If Brad says, you know, it is so important at the school that we have another officer, I'm going to make available with my colleagues on the county commissioner funds for that, and we'll give a little bit more somewhere else because Ron helped to get the additional $2 million. In other words, money is fungible. So not only is it a good idea, the legislation I just got passed can make it easier for local officials to do it. Now, with respect to the question of the background check and well, somebody could get away with it or already been through it, I would argue that we should have a background check every single time a gun is sold or transferred. So that would mean the gun shows. That would mean that if George over on 7th Street sells a gun to Mary over on 12th Street, we got to have a background check. Now, your point again is very valid. I mean, I'm not coming here to tell you this is going to be some cure-all for the challenge of gun violence. We've already talked about a variety of issues. A very good point made about mental health concerns. These people in the situation, and this relates to something else we should work on, in Florida and when the shooter shot the congresswoman in Arizona, everybody in town knew that there was a problem. The school knew there was a problem, the police knew there was a problem, and the community knew there was a problem. So we need better ways to coordinate and share the information, which is one of the reasons why I support your idea on mental health, is you start picking that up earlier and you make it more likely that you're going to be able to stop a tragedy. But your point is a fair one. I'm not here to say this particular thing is a cure-all. The question is, are we going to start improving the odds? And the aspect of the gun debate that I'm most troubled by is how, to some extent, gun violence is almost becoming normalized. Not just in Oregon, but around the country. When I'm out having town meetings tomorrow morning, I'll get up real early, probably in Bend, and work out. Because we're 3 hours different from the East Coast. I'll be there at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, something like that. And there's a story on TV about a school shooting. Comes right on the news. You guys have seen it 100 times. Breaking news. School shooting in Detroit. Miami, somewhere, 3 hours difference. And everybody who's working out gets off their bike and goes to the TV set and looks at the TV for a few minutes, and then they say it's horrible, and that they're going to pray for the people. They're going to send a donation or whatever. But after a few minutes, everybody goes back to working out. Like this is some kind of normal occurrence. We cannot ever let this be considered normal. And something that is just going to be, well, that's the way it is. We are better than this. And you had a good idea, there was a good idea, and the students in the back had a good idea. And I'll tell you, Eva Jones, from little rural Oregon, she nailed it when she went out and talked to the senators about her community knowing a lot about guns. And she said, hey, we can do better than this. Let's get an adult member because we have a bunch of really good students here.
992.
Hello, Senator. Mike Jones from Paisley Schools. And,
are you the head of the school?
No, this is my boss right here.
But he came over, and let's give him a round of applause because his students haven't asked a single bad question. Thanks for what you're doing at the school.
My question is concerning, we've talked about some challenges that we are sort of in the middle of, and I just wanted to ask a question more about what you see on the horizon. Maybe some issues that maybe you see as coming up soon facing Oregon, and if you have any comments about kind of what we can do to prevent some things.
Well, I think that healthcare is going to increasingly dominate every aspect of our life. We are almost pushing to immortality. I don't mean literally, but you look at the medicines and the drugs and the therapies, and there's going to be a real big question about whether we can afford them. So I think we're going to have some really tough issues with respect to healthcare coming up. And let's see, you students, you guys are what, 16, 17? How old? How old are you?
I am 19.
19, okay. So I bet you when you get together with your friends on like Friday night, say tomorrow night, you get together with your friends, I bet when you're hanging out with your friends, you talk about Medicare. Everybody know what Medicare is? That's a health program for the senior citizens. You guys all talk about Medicare on a date or something like that, right? So all the students are saying, he's either kidding us or he's really out of it. And I'm kidding you, but not completely. Because here's a number worth remembering. 10,000 people are going to turn 65 years old and become eligible for Medicare every single day for years and years to come. In terms of the federal budget, guys, Medicare is up here and everything else is down here in terms of the federal budget. So, I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out ways to make sure that there's quality care. And we're also looking at ways to make it more affordable. So I'm pushing very hard for more care at home rather than institution. One of the reasons I told that student that I'm so enthused about telemedicine is it helps rural Oregon, but it also can be really good for patients because the patients in the future are going to be very different than the ones we've seen in the past. Medicare, I was head of senior citizens before I was in public service. Medicare used to be if you broke your ankle, that in Medicare anymore. Medicare today is cancer, diabetes, heart disease, strokes, chronic pulmonary disease, and that's going to be most of the Medicare budget, guys. And in a lot of ways, it's also a reflection of a good news story. It used to be, if your parent or, say your parent got a cancer diagnosis, wasn't very likely to have a good prognosis. You know, and if they caught it early, maybe you'd get some quality of life, but you didn't get a very good prognosis. Now modern medicine has made it possible for people who have had cancer to go on and live another 25 years and pass from something else. But we're going to have to think through the difference between chronic illness, like I mentioned, cancer, diabetes, and acute care, which would be breaking your ankle and you got to get in the ambulance and go to the hospital and get it set really quickly. So I probably put healthcare right up at the top. And for you students, which is why I was joking that you're talking about Medicare, because I know that if you're 17 years old, you aren't talking about Medicare on a date. But if we don't figure this out, for you guys, there's less money for college scholarships. There's less money for stuff that you like to do, like parks and recreation and all that kind of thing. So we're in it together. And if you ask me about the biggest challenge of our time, and it's something I've really focused on because I was working with the senior citizens for quite some time, it's healthcare. And also because healthcare is so deeply personal. Because if you and the people you care about don't have their health, then pretty much everything else goes by the board. Can't go outside, can't make that hike, can't enjoy Thanksgiving dinner, all those kinds of things. Another good question. Yeah.
And while we're talking about healthcare, I don't know if you saw Charlie tweet with the CEO with the Link Health District came in.
Yeah, hi Charlie, how you doing? Good. You want to add anything on healthcare? I know you guys are trying hard to really think about coordinated care and chronic illness and the like. So tell everybody, what else you think is important on the healthcare front.
Thank you for letting me be here, and Senator, thank you for coming. We really appreciate all that you're doing, especially in dealing with broadband. That is a huge issue. It's so important.
Tell everybody, Charlie, why broadband is such a big deal, because, it's fine to talk about in theory, but if Charlie doesn't have broadband in rural Oregon, I think it can be life and death, right? I mean, tell people a little bit about it.
So one of the things that you need to think about when it comes to broadband, everybody that has a cell phone that works like a champ. At our hospital, we have great broadband, great internet. And you have broadband here to the school, right? But does everybody have good high-speed internet at home? So when the senator talks about having telehealth, that means having the ability, if one of you has diabetes, to be monitored by computer, which you can be in an urban setting. You can't do it in Paisley. And you can't do it in Plush. They don't even have cell service all around. So it's critical that we have that service, not just to the hospital, not just to the library or the school, but available to everybody. And while education, and all of you that are doing well, we're really proud of you, those that aren't, keep working at it. Education is vital, because without an education, you won't get a good job. That doesn't mean you have to go to college, but getting a good job means you're going to be able to afford better health. And we are talking about the real cost of health care is not health care, it's sickness care. At our hospital, we don't treat people that are healthy. We treat people that are sick. How do we stop people from getting sick? Living healthier. And there are a lot of things, Senator, that the more that you can work on to finance ways that we can deal with the issues that lead to poor health. Broadband is vital. Another reason why broadband is vital, in Lakeview, our internet comes from Klamath Falls by
fiber optic line. It's in the ground. When it gets cut because somebody's working on the highway, we don't have internet. We can have a cell phone, but we don't have internet. And so we need vitally in Lake County.
We need backup.
What we need is redundant service. And the best way to get that is to think of it like a loop. We're now like a spur. It comes and ends in Lakeview. If it can go from Lakeview to Paisley, to Christmas Valley, to Lapine, now we have a loop. So if somebody cuts it one place, it keeps providing service. We appreciate all the efforts that you're doing on that. Another big thing that you are, I know that you sent letters to the FCC about, the reduction in the USAC dollars. That's a great concern for us. For us alone, just in Lake County, that money is 70% of the cost of having internet is being supported by the federal government. If we see a reduction of that, means we can't deliver as much care. And so anything you can do to help us on that is vital.
And I think, Charlie, we're having a meeting tomorrow. I hope you're coming. I think we're having a meeting in St. Charles.
I won't be able to be at that, but we appreciate what you're doing on it.
Great. We'll be back at you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
You bet.
Okay. Guys, are we a student or a community member here?
I got a blue.
Good.
Blue 983. Going once, 983. We'll move on to a red ticket, 989.
That's me.
All right. So, you got a box seat, second row.
Thank you. So let's try something a little less important, but a little easier to fix maybe. And that'll be the satellite TV program. I've talked to Jacob about that in the past. North Lake County especially is, Bend is our trade area, and Medford is our source of local news. And, you know, it's a huge improvement over the early years when Denver was our local news. But anyway, you know, that was, what was that, 30 years ago? And so it seems reasonable that there ought to be a choice in those things, and we could select the community that would offer, well, for one thing, it would offer commercials that they'd actually get some good out of us watching. But, you know, especially just having the local news and being up to date, and weather as well. Thank you.
And what I'd like to do, because this new FCC is saying they want to rethink some of the satellite access, you know, policies. And I've been in Bedford and Bend, and the stations are talking about they would like to extend more local service. Jacob, you and the gentleman have talked about this before. We'll stay with you on it. This is so important because I got to tell you guys, the national news, I have kind of heard enough about Stormy Daniels, okay? People I talk to in Oregon want to know about the kind of stuff Brad was talking to me about is, you know, short line rail and access to health care, and they want to know what's going on at the high school, and they want to know about sports and stuff that's local, and I've just kind of had it with hearing about Kim Kardashian and Stormy Daniels. I'd like us to have people get local news about what really makes a difference for them. So, Jacob, you're in the back, you guys have phone numbers, emails and stuff. We'll get back to you, and I'm all over the FCC on this. I think it is so incredibly important. Local broadcast and local, you know, news, and are the folks from the Lake County Examiner here, or where are they? Let's give them a big round of applause. It's really great that we have them, and I'm trying to do things on your newsprint expenses and things like that. So local news, just That's what holds communities, together. It's one of those things that people might say, well, it's not the most important thing. I think it's really important. And that's why it's so great that we have this big crowd today, is that we're trying to share ideas and the like. And here we are. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Your Honor. Don't you think the mayor ought to get to ask something?
And I'll probably show my ignorance, but why do we have to bury a cable to get this? Why can't we get this from the satellite?
Well, I think that's one of the issues we're talking about in terms of access to satellites, is what are the best ways to speed it up there, to make it cheaper, and you might be being too logical for the federal government. Jacob, what is the answer to the mayor's question, and what is the state of the Federal Communications Commission and what they're looking at? Why don't you just kind of bring us up to date here?
Yeah, so I know there's kind of a number of proposals to use some different forms as opposed to wired communication. There have been proposals to use TV white space or satellite links, so I don't think there's been kind of agreement yet on exactly the right path to go down, but it's something that I know that our office and folks in Congress are kind of looking at and making sure that in doing so it doesn't interfere with any of the other communications that folks in the community rely on.
Mayor, I'd like to bring you into that discussion with Jacob and the like. Jacob is a smart young lawyer. He spends a lot of time kind of working out of Bend and getting out to all the rural areas. So if you have issues, you can call him nights and weekends and take all his free time and all that kind of thing. But he's a smart young lawyer, and for these kinds of issues, as I say, this is the nuts and bolts of actual governing. Brad and I have talked about it. Sometimes in government, people spend all their time hollering at each other and getting all red in the face. And people sort of miss what we're doing here, which is really the nuts and bolts of trying to give people a better quality of life. We'll bring Jacob. I'd like to bring the mayor into this discussion. And Brad, if you'd like to get into this too, we'd like to have you guys. All right.
Blue ticket, 533. 533.
Is that a student? Is that a student number? Mayor? 533?
Yeah.
Okay, come on, let's have a student. Sure, some of you guys have been, yeah, right there, gentlemen. In an orange shirt. He's got a Beaver's orange on.
My question is, we're asking about better healthcare and roads and all this. And I feel like if we have more jobs here, then this could bring it in better. And I was wondering about more of what your thoughts about exports and imports and foreign policies and stuff like that.
Great. Very good points. And let me kind of expand a little bit on it. And I'm going to talk about trade, and I'm going to talk about this question. Just 1 out of 5 jobs in Oregon revolve around international trade. And when people ask me, they come up and say, Ron, what's your philosophy about the economy? I say, grow it in Oregon, make it in Oregon, add value to it in Oregon, and ship it somewhere. Because the world loves buying Oregon. Whether it's our fruit, whether it's our wheat, whether it's our chips, our technology. That's a big part of my job, and the committee I serve on, we're the lead committee for international trade. So right now, I'm sure you're following it with the president, the discussion about trade, is we ought to do a better job of enforcing the trade laws. I agree with the president on that point. We've got to be tougher when China is stealing our technology and stealing our jobs. We also have to remember Oregon's got to have access to those markets. So we've got to have policies with some certainty and predictability. And it seems over the last couple months it's been sort of 1 day on and 1 day off and the like. Now, with respect to economic development, you were talking about, well, there was health care, there was roads and government. It's kind of chicken and egg. And that's what makes economic development the challenge. In other words, a community wants more private sector employers, okay? They want to grow the private sector jobs they have right now. And to get those employment opportunities, those companies are going to call up Brad and the mayor, and they're going to say, do you have good roads? Do you have broadband? In other words, it's chicken and egg. Those companies are going to ask it, and at the same time, we're going to ask them to say, hey, we'll agree to have jobs if we make the investments in things like roads and broadband. So economic development is chicken and egg, but make no mistake about it. Every one of you students has got to be thinking globally. The United States is what percentage of the global population, guys? How about a student take a crack at this? Anybody want to guess? What percentage of global population is the United States?
About 5.
You nailed it. Yeah, it's always a little, right around 5.5. I think what, for you expert students, I think global population is what, maybe 7 billion plus or something, and we're like 315 million, something like that. But he nailed it. So the point is, we've got to think globally. It's not just somebody in Paisley selling something to somebody in Coos Bay, or somebody in Coos Bay selling something to somebody in Bedford and Portland. It's all about global markets. And for all of you guys, for what it's worth, my counsel is, don't do what I did. When I was your age, all I was interested in was playing in the NBA. And I got a college basketball scholarship. It was a ridiculous idea that I was going to play in the NBA because I was too small, and I made up for it by being really slow. But I put all my eggs in one basket. And so when that reality splashed on me, I had to start studying and catching up. So for all of you guys, if you can get information about a language, and a lot of times you can do that stuff online, as we were talking about it, you're going to be a global player. You're going to be looking at all kinds of opportunities around the world. And the nice part about it is when you're successful, you can have the opportunity at some point in your life to also have a great time if you want to raise a family in Paisley. So that's probably a longer answer than you wanted, but you have a really good question. You want to follow it up? You nailed it. What year in school are you?
Sophomore.
Great. Very good point. Okay, I guess we're on a community member, huh?
Okay, red ticket 981.
Rolling guy here, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get you close.
All right. I'm Jack Thompson. I'm the superintendent of the Lake County ESD. And so I'm kind of representing all of the school districts in the county. And mine's more of a want to bring it to light for you is that we're pretty much coming down to a national crisis when it comes to education. We are not able to find educators anymore. Seniors in the class out here, how many of you are planning to become a teacher? Okay, fantastic. Please come back here. Okay, that's fantastic. I'm amazed. I did not expect to see any hands. We're having a very, very difficult time trying to find educators, special education, speech language pathologists. I've had a speech and language pathologist, 2 positions open since January 1. I have had 0 applicants. There are people out there smarter than I am that predicted this a while back, and they have been going to colleges, and they're hiring these speech and language pathologists straight out of college. They're hiring special education teachers straight out of college, and they are selling them to me at an exorbitant rate. So I currently have one that I'm paying almost double what my retiree was being paid. And she'd worked as a speech pathologist in our ESD for 30 years. And I'm paying almost double now for my next one. And so we've got a huge issue. You know about the CTE revitalization grant. Fantastic. You know, as an educator with 28 years experience, I could have predicted this about 20 years ago when I saw the shop teacher get laid off, and I saw the music teacher get laid off, and I saw the welding class get shut down, and I saw this and that and everything get shut down. And all of a sudden now, 20 years later, somebody said, oh gee, yeah, maybe we do need those kids being able to weld and being able to produce these things and being able to do that. And so now we've got this revitalization grant. Fantastic. We've kind of come to light that yes, these activities are important. This is nationally. My speech and language pathologist, she's coming from Louisiana, not from Oregon. I can't find her. Right now, I went to the Portland Job Fair for educators. There were 102 speech and language pathologists advertised, positions advertised. There were 16 that signed up for the job fair. This is a crisis. We don't have the people that want to go into education anymore. Everything that you see on the news is negative about education. It is not a glamorous job anymore. It is not a, hey, this is fantastic. I get my summers off. I can spend that time with my own children. This is great. People do not view it that way. Education has been underfunded for I don't know how many years. We've been badmouthed because we're not making the test scores. We're not making the test scores because we're underfunded. You want Johnny to read at 3rd grade? Give me the bodies. I'll sit a person down in front of Johnny, and I guarantee you Johnny will be able to read. So I just want to bring that awareness to you that at some point, we all make a decision every month. We pay our electric bill. Why do we pay our electric bill? Because it's important to us. It's top priority. We got to have our electricity. When does the education in the United States, when does that become the electric bill?
You make a number of good points, and there's a reason why my first big bill as a senator that became law was called the Secure Rural Schools Bill. That didn't just happen by osmosis. I chose it because I very much share your view. And especially as it relates to education, we have, if anything, and your statement was very, very eloquent, it's almost understating the problem. We have a nationwide problem, and we especially have a challenge in rural areas. It's very, very hard to get instructors in rural areas, so that you might have in Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, and Denver, you might have a big waiting list for teachers who would like to teach in the K-12 system there. But in the rural areas, just like you say, it's been hard to get people. So I've been supportive of measures on both sides. The nationwide effort, where I think the federal government can play a role in trying to make sure that there are better salaries and more of a financial security opportunity, for teachers, because this is such an important job. And I don't know if we have a lot of basketball fans besides me in the room, but I can tell you I've been watching all these NBA playoffs, and everybody on the bench, not starting, gets a salary of like 10 or 15 times what a teacher gets. So we want really good instructors. We're going to have to allocate additional kind of resources. That's number one. Number two, we ought to create incentives, which I've supported, to get quality teachers into rural areas, because I think that's the challenge. And finally, when you talk about career and technical education, which I've been a very strong supporter of, work with the ESDs, the education school districts, we're barely touching the surface of the challenge as we start to see artificial intelligence and machine learning playing a bigger and bigger role in education and essentially all of our life. I mean, already it's one of the reasons why this net neutrality issue is so important. Is communications going to be available to everybody? I guess if you're well-to-do, you spend a lot of your day talking to Alexa and just kind of figuring out everything that's going on and the like. But if you're in a small rural area, not only are you fighting for broadband, what Charlie is talking about, but you're worried that if the communications are just for well-to-do people, maybe somebody would try and take it back to, dial-up in rural areas. So I'm very much against voluntary net neutrality. The big cable companies want voluntary net neutrality. I said the other day, my wife and I are older parents. We have 3 small children. And I said, there's about as much chance that the big cable companies are going to have voluntary net neutrality as there is that William Peter Wyden, my son, age 10, will voluntarily limit the number of his desserts. It just isn't going to happen. So we're going to need to deal with pay. We're going to need to deal with rural incentives. We're going to need to deal with modern communications and particularly AI and machine learning, which has enormous implications for our whole workforce. So you guys do a great job. So yeah, please go ahead.
One of the other bigger issues that we're having is trying to find people that will, trying to find people that can fulfill those positions. Those CTE positions, people who are not going, there are not programs in college for these positions. So I need a welder. I need somebody to be able to teach welding. So I look out into my community. There's a guy, he's got 30 years working as a welder. He's still got another 10 years good, wanting to work. So I'm going to offer him a job. I can't get him licensed for one. And 2, I'm going to offer him a third less than he's going to make as a welder.
How much?
Where's the incentive? How do I,
How much would somebody like that, make here? Because I just had a bunch of businesses come to me in the metro area, and they were talking about those kinds of jobs, and jobs where with a community college degree, you could walk out in the metro area like $80,000, make 40 bucks an hour, $80,000 a year. My guess is here locally, you can't pay anywhere close to that.
No, starting,
50, 40?
A teacher coming in is about 40,000.
All right, I'm getting some more show of hands, and I want to get anybody who hasn't gotten their first one. And while some of you first-timers are getting prepared, I think the gentleman in the third row had his hand up. Yes, sir. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm
We just exercising your arms.
I'm the local superintendent of schools
Right.
in Paisley. What Jack's talking about, one of the things that I think of when I hear those concerns, because we do have concerns with staffing and being able to even bring a regular teacher, let alone some of these specialists into some of these remote areas. But one of the things that strikes me is we have laws that discourage us from seeking solutions like Jack's describing. We can't just hire somebody. We still have to have, go through all the same licensing procedures that other teaching positions have. But it seems to me that there are probably lots of great ideas how to solve those.
Check, could you guys, the 2 of you, for example, give me some recommendations on how you might streamline the rules to make it more attractive to hire educators in rural areas? Well, because I'm hearing this, and I don't want to make a lot of work for you, but you don't have to write like a bill, but just take a sheet of paper and say, here are the rules that if you streamline them, it would be easier to hire educators in rural or in community communities like Paisley. I'd love to work with you guys.
I think we have lots of success.
Good. Jacob, you got yourself another project, my friend. Charlie had something else to say, and he's always got good stuff. How about if we'll go this way. The gentleman raised his hand, he didn't say anything. The nice woman in the back, and then Charlie, and meanwhile, the students. Is there a student over there who's raising his hand? Okay. Whenever I see you guys, I've got homing vision for you students. So, students, we're going to have 3 adults ask questions. So I need one of you guys to break in with a really good question, okay? One of you students. I'm looking at all those really smart young women there in the back, and hope they'll ask the question. And they're smiling. Okay, yeah.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here, taking time out of your busy schedule. This probably has nothing to do with you as a United States Senator, but we in rural Oregon really feel stomped on when they're trying to pass laws that will ruin our gun rights as far as the guns we already own. Right. And I'm really concerned, and a lot of people are. You know, I have a pistol that holds 15 rounds, and the laws they're trying to pass now say it's going to be outlawed. And I disagree with that 100%. I am a member of the NRA. I do believe in background checks. I do believe in stronger background checks. The argument that I have is people want to kill somebody, they're going to kill somebody. Whether my gun holds 15 or 10 rounds. Now, it doesn't make any sense to me to take things from us law-abiding citizens just because of fear on the other side of the state.
2 good points. The first is on this question of rural Oregon, and I think that the gentleman put it very diplomatically when he said we kind of feel stomped on. And often people are nowhere near as polite in making that reference as you had been, sir. I'm from Portland. I love Portland. My only frustration is I didn't get to play for the Portland Trailblazers, because I would have loved that. I am not a United States Senator from the state of Portland. I'm a United States Senator to represent every single nook and cranny, every single blade of grass in Oregon. And that's why I'm here in Paisley. Mayor, what, population 300, 250, what's the population? What's the population?
About 250.
250, okay. That's why I'm in Paisley today, is because I thought it was important to listen to you. And I think your point touches on an area that's going to get a lot of attention. And I hear there are ballot measures maybe and this and that and something else. But at the federal level, this is the whole question of the assault weapon. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking to all sides about this, because it's clear to me that you can take practically any gun and reconfigure it and the like, and I'm sure you know much more about it than I do, reconfigure it, and then it becomes an assault weapon. So I think everybody knows that, you know, we want to be sensitive to, you know, military style, you know, weapons, you know, things that are military, you know, weapons. But I'm going to spend a lot of time talking to people in rural Oregon about just the point that you're making, because I support the Second Amendment, as I said, with the students on things like the research and background checks and the like. I've been talking to all sides, and I'm going to talk to all sides about these other issues as well. I appreciate the point and the way you've made it. And Jacob, if we can get a phone number and an email from the gentleman, I'd like to keep talking to you about it, because I'm particularly telling my colleagues in the Congress, let's really think this through, because depending on how you go about doing it, practically any gun, I guess, could be considered an assault weapon, which is, I think, what you're, you know, touching about. I gather that the students need to leave for lunch. Well, I am not, as your senator, going to get in the way of lunch. So, a couple of adults had additional questions. I'm going to stay for that. Let's everybody give a round of applause to the students, because they did a good job. So, you guys, thank you for coming. Anybody wants to stick around, we'd love to have you as well. We had two other adults on offer. The nice person there in the back, and I think we had the woman in green, and the gentleman in orange, and Charlie. We got nice woman in green, gentleman in orange, Charlie. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and I'm really tired of the conversations. I've been listening to the call of Gabby Gifford, Newtown, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, Las Vegas. Isn't going to do anything. What's the point? You know, and we are 5% of the world's population, but we own half the guns in the world. We're a gun-loving nation. We're a war nation. We're always in war. You know, I think the conversation has to be about what a big deal taking a life is. It's the biggest deal there is. And it's the biggest pain there is. Ask the veteran. You know, I don't know where to go with this. But my question to you, and I was very moved by your speech on the Senate floor about your brother. I think that was after Las Vegas. Thank you for doing that. Our DACA kids, they are our kids. So, what are we doing?
Yeah, let's talk about these DACA kids, because this also illustrates a little bit of the compromise concept that needs to be. And I think that's why the gentleman's point was so good. He was talking about kind of a little bit of compromise and a little sanity. These DACA kids, folks, they have done nothing wrong. Repeat, zero wrong. They were brought to this country when they were like 6 months or 8 months old or something like that. And I've been meeting with them. A lot of them are working 2 jobs. They're getting really good grades. I had this heartbreaking story up at the U of O. One of the students was telling me that he was volunteering for his local sheriff, his local police folks, and they loved him. And eventually they came back and they were, I gather, almost in tears over it. They said to this young man that he couldn't be a volunteer anymore because they felt that that would get them in trouble with all the immigration authorities and the like. So, we ought to make it possible for these DACA kids who've not committed any crimes and the like to be able to stay. And here's what a group of us in the Senate said. The president wants this wall. It's going to cost $25 billion. I personally, I say this respectfully, I think this is a really bad idea, folks. My parents fled the Nazis in the 30s. Not all got out. My dad came to this country, he kissed the earth, and he taught himself English and talked his way into the army because they weren't much interested in him because he was overweight and he had flat feet. And he convinced the army brass that he could drop propaganda pamphlets on the Nazis, tell them that they were going to freeze to death and all the rest. He's the most patriotic guy there ever was. My dad, if he heard about this wall, he'd say that's not what America is about. So the president wants the wall. And a bunch of us got together who would like to give justice for these DACA kids and do not support the wall. We basically said, Mr. President, we'll go along this time with the funds for the wall. We just said, it's apropos of the point I think the gentleman's making is, you know, people got to work together and all the rest. Boy, I had a stomachache that night. Oh, that wall, it just was kind of driving me crazy. But you have to compromise. So the Trump people turned that down too, which I think is a shame. Because I'm willing to compromise. And you got to compromise. And that's what the gentleman was just talking about. He wants urban Oregon to listen to rural Oregon. Compromise. Try to come together. And I have to share your view that that's why I was talking about graduation and these high school kids. About how precious life is. You just try to imagine some of these kids in graduation ceremonies this spring, looking perhaps at the kid whose alphabetical name is in front of them and isn't there. That's helpless. Just
Yeah, thanks for coming today. I'm Ryan Romero, public service aspiring professional fisherman, but it's just a dream for now. Keep on talking about healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare, preventative care, sickness care. We have a gentleman here from Lake County Healthcare, and see all you guys are drinking nice bottled water here. And I just want to talk a little bit about this. One health problem, in my opinion, is some of the drinking water here. Talk about broadband, safeguards, redundant. We don't want to be the tip of the wagon wheel. We want to have a circle, so if something goes wrong, we have a plan B. So this gentleman from Lake County Healthcare can attest that Lake County water is overall poor. Right now our city's doing an awesome job. They're kicking butt in the filtration plant they got. Below the arsenic levels, doing real good.
So you're happy with what Roth is doing on the cleaning up the water?
They're kicking butt, they're doing good, but as a small community, I think we need a plan B or some sort of safeguard, because these kids are drinking, the students who are just here filling up their water bottles with good water now, but sometimes that plan doesn't always work. We need a plan B, and my daughter out there at school drinking out of the water fountain right now good, and like I said, they're making steps in the right direction, doing good, but what do you think about grants or something to get a backup option?
Well, I'm very, very supportive, and I've used my seat on the budget committee on this. And Ms. Gautreaux is here. And Mary, didn't we have the other day somebody give us a number of the schools in Portland where the kids can't drink the water out of the tap? This is like in Portland. It's supposed to be like, you know, the big city and all, and they can't drink out of the tap there. And I think what they did was some of them voted for a bond, didn't they, to do that? But that's hard in a small community to get enough people for a bond. So you bet, I very much support additional federal assistance with grants and the like, because it doesn't get much more basic than clean water. And I mean, how can a country as rich and strong as ours still have so many places where they're drinking out of bottled water? And I think, I mean, Flint, back in Michigan, was a wake-up call a couple of years ago. We got a lot more to do, and I'm really glad that you're praising, the mayor and Brad on these local things, because I think they do a lot of good work for us. Mayor, you want to add anything to what you were saying, or you can just substitute tickets?
This water's out of the tap.
All right, Charles, please.
But it's funding is what it amounts to. We've done everything we can with the amount of money that we have, and to tell you the truth, Bill, I don't know how we would come up with an alternative source at this point. But I appreciate it.
Mayor, here's what we'll do. We'll do a really thorough scrub on the federal grant side and see if there may be some things that you all can, use. But I always prefer to doing these things under promise and see if you can actually do something useful. So we'll get into that and work with you on it, okay? All right. Charlie, you were trying to tell everybody something. I know it's going to be good.
Senator, what I was going to try and address is what you're hearing about is infrastructure. One of the biggest problems that we're facing, certainly in Lake County, yes, water is a problem, Lakeview has a problem with its water, but it's more than that. The infrastructure that we don't have is housing. Much of our housing, and it isn't just in Lake County, it's across the country, is housing that was built in the 40s, in the 30s, sometimes in the 60s and 70s. We've never been a very wealthy county. And so a lot of our houses were built with whatever people could afford, and they weren't strong and they weren't necessarily well built. We have lots of houses that don't have homes, that don't have the infrastructure, aren't built well enough. In fact, they're what you might call pushover. We've been looking at HUD and financing that is available for urban settings. Anything you can do to help us all get infrastructure with housing issues, that will help us bring teachers. We can't bring nurses or bring other professionals because they can't even find a house that they can afford or that's reasonable to get.
Good. I'm going to touch on housing. I also want to say that this young man who started us off more than 90 minutes ago with a really good question with respect to the economy and economic development has stayed throughout. And with all the witnesses in the room, a nice fraction of the Paisley population, I think, I want to have everybody here that I hope that one day he'll want to be an intern in one of our offices. Are you a senior this year?
I am.
What are you going to do next year?
Lewis and Clark in Portland, you know my mom.
Oh, yes! Yes! Okay, great. Well,
he would be a good candidate for your internship.
we want to, yes, we know his mom, now I know the history. Okay, but I mean, that's exactly why it's so good to have the students involved, and it really makes us proud to have them. With respect to housing, we got something coming up that I'm going to do my best to make work for rural Oregon. In the last budget agreement, I, as a senior Democrat on the tax writing committee, and Orrin Hatch and Rhea Cantwell was very involved, we got an expansion of the low-income housing tax credit. And this is something that is very popular with developers and is very popular with tenants, with residents. One of the things I've been concerned about, the money goes to the state, and not enough of it in the past has gone to rural Oregon. So what I'd like to do, Mary and Jacob, is be on the phone to the state people, because they are going to get some additional help with the low-income housing tax credit that I was part of the group that put it together. Let's see what we can do about getting some of it, in here, because that's new, and I mean, it's not an enormous amount of money, but even a small amount can make a difference. And it's popular with the people who build the units, it's popular with the residents as well, and also has a lot less red tape. Thank you. So we've been at it for more than 90 minutes. There has not been a bad question in the House. Not one. Nobody shouted at each other. Nobody screamed at each other. People learned and listened, and boy, I learned a lot. So to the mayor and Brad, big thanks for running this meeting, and I'll stick around and visit with folks individually, but this is what the founding fathers wanted government to look like. They wanted it to look like this. So we're going to put this in the to be continued department. And I really appreciate Lake County and Paisley specifically. And we'll have plenty to follow up on the day ahead. Thank you, everybody, for coming.